Do you think he already forgot you? That he moved on? That his life continued? That what you two lived is now in the past? And that if he ever felt something for you, he no longer cares? Most women make the mistake of interpreting silence as indifference, distance as forgetfulness, and apparent calmness as moving on. But the emotional reality of men is much more complex than it seems on the surface. Not all pain makes noise. Not every absence is proof of detachment. There are men who seem composed on the outside, but inside they are collapsing quietly. They don't shout it, they don't write it out, and they certainly don't admit it, not to you, not even to themselves. Some men cry in private, while the world sees only their steady face. Some block your number, yet their eyes still wander back to your name as if it has power over them. Some tell their friends they are fine, but every joke, every picture, every polished moment on social media is nothing more than camouflage. Their pain hides in contradictions, in actions that look senseless but are in fact fragile defenses. Because when a man suffers in silence, he doesn't announce it. He lets it leak through the cracks of his behavior. And this is where most people misunderstand the masculine soul. Women often carry pain by expressing it directly, or sometimes suppressing it entirely until it bursts. Men, on the other hand, create a hidden language, gestures, habits, subtle signals that reveal everything only if you know how to look beyond appearances. It's almost as if they are speaking in code, waiting for someone intuitive enough to read between the lines. A man rarely says, "I'm still hurting." Instead, he lets his pride hold the words hostage, while his actions whisper the truth louder than his voice ever could. You see it in the way he avoids you, yet somehow never stops watching. He will sit in the same room, pretending you are invisible, yet you can feel the weight of his eyes when you turn away. He will scroll past your profile, not daring to reach out, but unable to resist checking if you seem happy, if you look like you've moved on. His pride tells him not to approach, but his heart refuses to release you completely. This is not indifference, it is survival. For him, coming closer would mean reopening wounds he barely knows how to close. So, he chooses distance, not because he feels nothing, but because he feels too much. And perhaps you've noticed the strange paradox. The louder he insists he is fine, the more likely it is that he isn't. When a man posts his endless smiles, his life is amazing captions, his motivational lines about strength and freedom, it's rarely about his audience. It's about you. It is his way of screaming without words. Look at me, see me, notice that I exist without you. Yet every exaggerated performance is a clue that he still hasn't healed. Because someone who has truly found peace doesn't need to prove it. Only those who are still wrestling with their shadows feel the need to put on a show. And then there are the contradictions, the unpredictable storms. One day he blocks you, the next he unblocks you. He disappears, only to return quietly, as though nothing happened. He sends you cold replies, but then lingers in your orbit in subtle ways. What seems like instability is actually an inner war, the rational part of him saying, "Let go," while the emotional part whispers, "I still need her." He can't reconcile the two, so he swings between extremes, and you become the battleground of his unresolved grief. You may be tempted to react, to match his energy, to demand clarity, but what if I told you the most powerful response is not reaction at all, but presence? When you don't chase him, when you don't play the game of proving who is doing better, when you don't let ego drag you into the storm, you become the one thing he cannot escape, a mirror of calmness that reflects back his chaos. And in that silence, he feels both the weight of what he lost and the faint hope of what he might one day recover. A man in silent pain does not confess it in words. He shows it in the way he clings to fragments of you even while pretending he has erased you. He shows it when he looks away too quickly, when his laughter feels forced, when he talks about you with others, but not to you. His pride is the wall, but behind it there is a storm he cannot tame. And the irony is that the more he tries to bury you, the deeper he realizes he hasn't let you go. So don't be deceived by the mask. Silence does not always mean indifference. Sometimes It is the loudest cry of a man who doesn't know how to grieve you openly. When a man is still hurting, he doesn't just hide it in his silence, he leaks it through his contradictions. You might see him living as though nothing has touched him, dressing sharper, going out more often, filling his days with noise and movement. To the outside world, it looks like growth, like freedom, like the rebirth of someone who has finally turned the page. But if you look closer, beneath the polished image, you will sense the desperation. His laughter rings hollow, his energy feels forced. Every picture, every post, every phrase about happiness is not a window into his peace, but a curtain covering what he cannot face. It is less about him living fully and more about him convincing himself that he has. Because the truth is, someone who has genuinely healed doesn't need to broadcast it. Peace is quiet, healing whispers. But a man who is still at war with himself will unconsciously seek an audience, will need you, especially you, to see the performance. He wants you to believe he has conquered the loss, but the more he insists, the clearer it becomes that he hasn't. And this, ironically, is not a game, it is survival. Pretending becomes his shield, the only way he knows to keep moving without collapsing. But his mask slips in unexpected ways. It shows in the sudden flare of anger when your name surfaces, in the contradiction of blocking you only to later reappear, in the indirect messages that slip into his posts. It is the silent admission that his rational mind cannot control his emotional heart. He is torn between two instincts, one that urges him to close the door forever, and another that clings desperately to the fragments of connection still left. That is why you see him stumble, change his stance, and contradict himself. It is not weakness, it is grief, wearing the armor of pride. And here lies the most dangerous illusion. When you witness this chaos, you may believe you hold the power to fix it. You may feel the urge to reach out, to soothe, to explain, to remind him that you were real. But what if I told you that stepping into that storm only traps you in it? His healing is not your battlefield. The truth is, the more you react, the more fuel you give to his chaos. But the more you stand still, rooted in your own calmness, the more he is forced to face his own reflection. Your silence, your restraint, becomes the loudest teacher. That is why some men choose the strangest path of all: indirect communication through the digital world. They post songs that seem written for you, share quotes that mirror your story, publish images that only you would understand. To everyone else, it looks like nothing, but to you, it feels personal because it is. Social media becomes his substitute for words he cannot say directly. It's safer for him to hide behind a song lyric than to send you a message. Safer to leave a clue in a post than to risk the vulnerability of reaching out. And you may wonder, is this really about me, or am I just imagining it? No, you're not imagining it. If he didn't want you to see it, he wouldn't show it. The truth is, every indirect message is a quiet attempt to stay tethered to you without breaking the pride that keeps him from admitting it openly. But here is where wisdom matters most. If you react, if you acknowledge it directly, you hand him back the control he is secretly afraid to hold. But if you observe without being pulled in, you rise above the game and stay aligned with your truth. Because the paradox is this: the more he tries to prove he doesn't need you, the more it reveals that he still does. And the more you refrain from reacting, the stronger your presence becomes, not because you are distant, but because you are unshakable. Some men will even go as far as to cut you out completely, blocking, erasing, disappearing. To the outside world, it looks final. But then, as suddenly as he vanished, he reappears. No explanation, no apology, just visible again, as though nothing happened. And that's because blocking was never about you, it was about him. It was his way of creating the illusion of control when emotions overwhelmed him. But once the intensity settled, once the fire of anger cooled into the ache of longing, he quietly opened the door again. He wanted to keep you close enough to exist, but far enough not to feel weak. And that contradiction alone reveals the truth. He hasn't moved on. Because a man who has truly let go doesn't need to erase and restore, doesn't need to push you away only to return. Only the ones still torn inside dance in this back-and-forth rhythm, because their hearts haven't yet decided what they want. The irony is that you may never hear any of this from him. He won't say, "I miss you," even if the weight of it keeps him awake at night. He won't confess that no one else feels right, even though he tries. Instead, he will test freedom and find it hollow, taste new connections but find them tasteless, search for meaning in others but only encounter shadows of what he once had with you. And still, he will keep silent, because silence feels safer than the risk of rejection. So remember this: when a man avoids you but still watches, when he posts for you but never messages, when he blocks you but later reappears, these are not signs of indifference. They are the raw language of unprocessed love, coded in contradictions and pride. His silence may not sound like longing, but sometimes silence is the purest echo of a heart that still hasn't let go. There is another truth you must understand. When a man claims he has moved on, but deep down still feels the weight of you, he begins to live in contradiction with himself. He may explore new connections, but each one feels strangely hollow, like trying to fill a space that was carved for someone else. He may accept attention from others, but no smile warms him in the same way. No touch feels like home. He sits across from someone new, and even as he listens, a part of him compares. Not because he wants to, but because memory is stronger than his will. And this is the part no one sees: his silent refusal to let anyone else fully in. It's not that he lacks opportunities. It's not that no one wants him. It's that no one ignites in him the same flame that once burned when he was with you. And that frustrates him, because on the surface, he wants to believe he is free. He tells himself he should be open, that he should be ready, that time has passed and the story is over. Yet when he tries, he feels the void more clearly than ever. Every attempt to replace you only reinforces the truth that he cannot. And so he lives in a strange exile, physically present with others, emotionally absent, still tethered to the memory of you. This is perhaps the cruelest form of silent suffering. Because while others may see a man who is independent, strong, or desirable, he is secretly carrying a loneliness no one can touch. A loneliness shaped not by the lack of company, but by the absence of you. And in that absence, he wrestles with himself. He asks questions he can't answer. Why can't I feel the same with someone new? Why does her shadow remain even when she is gone? Why does the memory of her linger stronger than the reality of the present? These are the questions he won't admit out loud. They stay buried in the quiet moments of his nights, in the silence after the laughter dies down, in the space between conversations, when the noise fades and he is left alone with his truth. And here is where women often misread his silence. They see distance and assume he doesn't care. They see him with someone else and believe he has replaced them. They see his indifference and think it is real. But if you knew the private world he lives in, you would see the opposite. You would see that his detachment is not proof of forgetting, but evidence of a heart still haunted. That every cold glance, every unspoken word, every act of avoidance hides the same confession: I still haven't let you go. What he doesn't understand is that silence can be louder than words. His absence is not empty, it is heavy. His contradictions are not random, they are messages. His attempts to prove his independence are not strength, they are wounds in disguise. He may never admit it, not to you, not even to his closest friends, but every action is marked by the shadow of what he lost. And perhaps you wonder, why doesn't he just say it? Why can't he confess, even if only once, that you still live inside him? The answer is simple, yet profound: pride. For many men, pride is the armor they refuse to remove. To admit pain feels like weakness. To admit longing feels like surrender. And so they choose silence, even if it destroys them slowly. They choose contradictions, even if they reveal more than words ever could. They choose to act fine, even if every fiber of their being aches. But here is the secret. No matter how hard he tries to bury you, the truth will surface. It surfaces in his restless eyes when you walk into the room. It surfaces in the way he reacts sharply to your name. It surfaces in the way he cannot fully let another woman in no matter how much he tries. His silence is not peace, it is the battlefield where his love, his pride, and his fear clash endlessly. And though he will never admit it, you are still at the center of that war. For you, the lesson is not to chase him, not to solve him, not to lose yourself in his storm. The lesson is to see clearly, to understand that what looks like indifference may be hidden devotion, to know that his silence does not erase your place in his heart, and above all, to remember that his healing is not yours to carry. Because the more you stay centered, the more you allow him to face his own truth without dragging you down into it. In the end, silence is not absence. Silence is language, and when a man suffers in silence, he speaks in a code only the intuitive can read. A code written in contradictions, in glances, in indirect words, in the choices that make no sense until you realize they all trace back to one thing. He still feels you. He still hasn't let go. So, the next time you think his silence means he's forgotten, remember this: silence is not forgetting. Sometimes silence is love, twisted and hidden, but still alive. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream of all. If you listen closely, you'll realize that silence is never empty. It carries weight, it carries memory, it carries everything he refuses to say out loud. And the irony is that while you may question whether he ever truly cared, his silence itself is the evidence that he did. Because indifference is clean, it moves forward, it forgets, it doesn't look back. But his silence isn't clean. It's messy, filled with contradictions, with sudden bursts of attention followed by cold withdrawal, with stories that sound like messages, with glances that vanish when you catch them. These are not the movements of someone indifferent. They are the fragments of someone still chained to what he lost. He doesn't tell you that he hasn't been able to find anyone who stirs him the way you did. He doesn't confess that his nights are filled with comparisons, that every date feels like a shadow, that every attempt at connection collapses under the weight of memory. He won't admit that sometimes he hears your voice in his mind as though you were still near. But the truth is, he hasn't replaced you, and he doesn't even know if he can. This is why his silence cuts so deep. It's not a wall built against you, it's a cage he built for himself. He wants to be free, but he doesn't know how to unlock it. He wants to move on, but his heart refuses to obey his mind, and so he drifts, caught between the desire to let go and the inability to release. It is one of the quietest and most painful battles a man can live through, to crave new beginnings but remain haunted by a past he cannot bury. And perhaps you've felt the same, wondering if the absence of words means the absence of love, if distance means detachment. But now you see the truth. Sometimes the silence is not about you at all. It is about him, about his fear of vulnerability, his pride, his inability to process what he lost. His silence is not forgetting, it is remembering in the only way he knows how. The most powerful thing you can do is not to break that silence, not to demand answers, not to fill the void with explanations. The most powerful thing you can do is to stay grounded in yourself. Because when you no longer need his recognition, his silence loses its power over you, and paradoxically, that is when he feels it the most. When you are calm, when you do not chase, when you do not try to prove your worth, you become the one thing he cannot escape, the reflection of everything he has yet to heal. And maybe one day he will find the courage to admit it. Maybe he will say the words he has swallowed for so long. Or maybe he never will. Maybe he will carry this truth quietly for the rest of his life. But whether he speaks it or not doesn't change the reality. Silence can be love's last language. And if you know how to listen, you'll hear the echoes. So don't be fooled. Don't assume that his absence is apathy. Don't think that blocking, avoiding, or pretending means he is free. Often, it is the opposite. The ones who scream the least are the ones who feel the most. The ones who act the strongest are the ones still breaking inside. And the ones who seem to have forgotten you may be the ones who carry you everywhere they go. Remember this: a man may stop speaking to you, but if he has not stopped feeling you, it will show. It will slip through his eyes, his contradictions, his attempts at control. And even in silence, you will know, because silence is not the end. Sometimes, silence is the clearest sign that you are still alive in his heart, even if his pride never lets him admit it. And if these words resonate with you, if they opened your eyes to what lies beneath the quiet surface, then hold on to this truth. Don't measure love by what is spoken. Don't measure absence by distance. Look deeper, because hearts often speak in ways the tongue cannot. And if you've ever doubted whether he still feels, you know this, silence may be his way of saying what his lips never could. And maybe he will never tell you. Maybe he will never gather the courage to admit that his silence was never indifference, but love imprisoned by pride. Yet you can feel it, you can read it in the contradictions, in the way he avoids but never forgets, in the quiet energy that still lingers between you. Silence does not always mean forgetting. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream of a heart that still hasn't let go. So, if this video opened your eyes, if it touched something you've always felt but could never explain, don't let it end here. Subscribe to HeartSync X, turn on the notification bell, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Because love, loss, and the unspoken truths of the human soul are not meant to remain hidden in silence. They are meant to be understood together.